Yay. We'll see if anyone joins us live, or this might be an awkward time for people to join live.
I was wondering that too. Some people will be in their work days, and I was thinking if it were me, I would probably put it on my Bluetooth and listen to it on my commute. It's
Yeah,
probably what I would do.
yeah. But it's the time that worked for us, so we'll see. We'll just see.
Yeah.
See.
Yeah.
Hello, it's a weird day.
It's a really weird day. And I messaged you earlier because I was thinking that it can be so disorienting and discombobulating to have all of this political and external chaos going on. It's really hard to center one's self. And so I asked you if it was okay with you if I opened with kind of an anchoring or grounding prayer. And you said you liked that idea. So,
Oh, great. Yeah, will you do that
yeah.
for us?
Yeah. So let's go ahead and do that first. And I was also thinking about how I would like to invite all of us to join our bodies right now, to pay attention to what's going on, especially in the core of our bodies, and notice ourselves seated or standing where the pressure points hit the earth, and to take just a few moments while I read these words and anchor yourself so that we can be present for ourselves and for each other. It's a poem called The Felt Sense Prayer, and it's by Leah O'Connor. I am the pain in your head, the knot in your stomach, the unspoken grief in your smile. I am your high blood sugar, your elevated blood pressure, your fear of challenge, your lack of trust. I am your hot flashes, your cold hands and feet, your agitation and your fatigue. I am your shortness of breath, your fragile low back, the cramp in your neck, the despair in your sigh. I am the pressure on your heart, the pain down your arm, your bloated abdomen, your constant hunger. I am where you hurt, the fear that persists, your sadness of dreams unfulfilled. I am your symptoms, the causes of your concern, the signs of imbalance, your condition of dis-ease. You tend to disown me, suppress me, ignore me, inflate me, coddle me, condemn me. I am not coming forth for myself as I am not separate from all that is you. I come to garner your attention, to enjoin your embrace so I can reveal my secrets. I have only your best interests at heart as I seek health and wholeness by simply announcing myself. You usually want me to go away immediately, to disappear, to slink back into obscurity. You're mostly irritated or frightened, and many times shocked by my arrival. From this stance, you medicate in order to eradicate me. Ignoring me, not exploring me, is your preferred response. More times than not, I am only the most recent note of a long symphony, the most evident branches of roots that have been challenged for seasons. So I implore you, I am a messenger with good news, as disturbing as I can be at times. I'm wanting to guide you back to those tender places in yourself, the place where you can hold yourself with compassion and honesty. If you look beyond my appearance, you may find that I am a voice from your soul, calling to you from places deep within that seek your conscious alignment. I may ask you to alter your diet, get more sleep, exercise regularly, breathe more consciously. I might encourage you to see a vaster reality and worry less about the day to day fluctuations of life. I may ask you to explore the bonds and the wounds of your relationships. I may remind you to be more generous and expansive, or to attend to protecting your heart from insult. I might have you laugh more, spend more time in nature, eat when you are hungry and less when pained or bored. Spend time every day, if only for a few minutes, being still. Wherever I lead you, my hope is that you will realize that success will not be measured by my eradication, but by the shift in the internal landscape from which I emerge. I am your friend, not your enemy. I have no desire to bring pain and suffering into your life. I am simply tugging at your sleeve, too long immune to gentle nudges. I desire for you to allow me to speak to you in a way that enlivens your higher instincts for self care. My charge is to energize you, to listen to me with a sensitive ear and heart of a mother attending to her precious baby. You are a being so vast, so complex, with amazing capacities for self regulation and healing. Let me be one of the harbingers that lead you to the mysterious core of your being, where insight and wisdom are naturally available when called upon with a sincere heart. I'm going to read that last line and then I'd like to ring a bell for our opening. Let me be one of the harbingers that lead you to the mysterious core of your being, where insight and wisdom are naturally available when called upon with a sincere heart.
Thank you, C.
Yes.
I really appreciated that. It brings up for me, I guess. What sort of wisdom would you give us? I mean, all of that wisdom in the prose, but then what would you just share with us that we might turn to this day instead of or in addition to watching CNN or wherever folks are turning right now? What would you say to that spiritual practitioner?
I watched a documentary with Robin the other day, my spouse, called My Octopus Teacher. Oh my gosh. It's about a man who befriends an octopus over the course of 1 year and interacts with her on a daily basis. And he gets obsessed and involved in her well being and bonds with her, which was so shocking and surprising. And one of the things he said in this documentary was an octopus, 2/3 of their brain, their messaging, their instincts come from their tentacles, and only 1/3 from their actual head. And that reminded me of a training I attended on trauma, in which I learned that 90% of the information in our emotional beings comes from what they call the gut brain in the core of our bodies. And only 10% of the emotional information goes from our brain to our bodies. And so I would say this: our bodies hold so much wisdom, and we have been taught to excise ourselves from our bodies. And I would say today my goal has been a goal of integration, paying attention to the wisdom of the body and just noticing within myself what is going on, which for me today is unrest.
Yeah, thank you.
How about for you, Jen?
Oh gosh, this is a question that I'm just always asking myself, and I don't know that I have a good answer to it because I love what you say about noticing and seeing what's true in your body. And for me, that connects also to the work that our congregation's doing around white body supremacy and healing of racialized trauma, which step one, see it and feel where it comes up for you in your body. So that's great and that's helpful to me. There are times when I don't turn on the news at all, when I know something is going on and I just don't. The election this year, I did not look at media at all. But there are times when I think it's, I don't know, it feels more important to bear witness, to pay attention. And so I have been watching the news a lot today. And I guess maybe what I would think is helpful is kind of a both and perspective. If you want, I can hear the construction folks out the door singing. I don't know if that's coming across, but if you hear some singing, there's a lot of stuff going on.
That's great.
I mean, maybe try to connect to your joy a little bit today. Witness to what just seems really, I don't know, not surprising to me, but almost surreal watching. I don't know. And also, I think that taking a break from, like Ginny early on in the chat, and I'm trying to respond to chat while being present, said, I can't focus on work, so here I am. Yes. And I think, like, yeah, that's okay. C and I are going to dive into some of the holy text, and maybe that will be a little bit of break or release. And I think we need that kind of space.
Yes, I love that. And I like that you did say both and. Sometimes it is taking a break. Sometimes it's being aware and witnessing, as you said. That was wonderful.
Yeah, witnessing the hard stuff as well as the beautiful stuff.
Right.
So we want to invite you to engage with us on the chat. If you are hanging out, please do chat with each other, and you can ask questions, or we'll try to keep an eye on the chat and also engage that. And this is our first, we literally have not really talked about what we're going to do here.
No, which can really help with the spontaneity. And I remember when I used to do therapy, and I would always show up and just see what unfolded. And I would have an idea maybe of a framework, but oftentimes it was obliterated. So I imagine this may be similar.
Yeah, I'm excited to just see where the conversation takes us. And so full disclosure, C and I have been talking about doing something like this for a couple of years now.
In a podcast format.
Podcast form.
So then you said, do you want to do a podcast that's not a podcast?
Yeah.
And so here we are.
Kind of a podcast, but our faces are visible, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway. So what we do know, we did give ourselves this framework of, well, let's look at the lectionary and see what texts are coming up for us and have some conversation around those texts. And C and I both preach, so we both sort of have a, practice of reading the scripture and translating it into, is that how you would describe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, a practice of spirituality around sacred texts,
yeah.
I would say.
And asking the questions of, like, so how does this connect with where we are today, even this moment with the in unrest and terrorism happening at the Capitol? Where does the scripture intersect with that? And I think it does. It always does.
It does.
I'm wondering which texts you read, because there are lectionary texts for literally today, because this is the Feast of the Epiphany, and then there are texts for Sunday. So which ones are you?
I think I chose the ones for Sunday.
Okay.
But I'm not sure.
Well, give me a reference.
I looked at Isaiah 60, 1-6.
Oh yeah. So we're January. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
Psalm 72. Ephesians 3 and Matthew 2.
Oh, good golly. We read wait a second. Tell me again the Matthew text.
2, 1-12.
Okay, you're on Epiphany texts for exactly today, this moment.
Oh, okay. I thought I read it for Sunday. But I'm new to this whole using the internet to find the lectionary.
It occurred to me this morning that I wonder which texts C read.
So you did different ones?
Well, the texts for so Sunday in the lectionary. So lectionary is, I don't know what people are familiar with and not familiar with. It is a very mainline Protestant, and Catholic tradition to use the lectionary to guide the readings of the scripture throughout the church year and to follow the seasons, right? It's Advent, it's Christmastide, it's Epiphany. That is not a practice in most non-denominational evangelical spaces, which is where I grew up and where you grew up too.
Yes. Yes.
So encountering the lectionary was a really new, I just thought pastors randomly decided, I'm going to talk about Genesis this morning.
Same.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The lectionary is kind of like a blueprint for how you get through the year. And so we just finished Christmastide. Today is the Feast of the Epiphany. Sunday is baptism of Christ Sunday.
Oh, okay. So, that I didn't know.
Yeah. So the scripture for Sunday, the gospel anyway, is Mark. We're in the year of Mark because this is year B. We just finished year A. We're in year B. And Mark's gospel takes over a lot and Mark's my favorite gospel. So that's exciting.
When I was in Bible college, one of our professors, Brother Taylor, had us do, mine must have been 8 feet by 3 feet high graph of the book of Mark.
Oh, whoa.
Every verse, oh my gosh, it was colored and organized and themes and I was glad it was the shortest gospel. Yeah. So I grew to love Mark then, but I didn't read Mark for today.
That's fine. That's sweet. I was feeling a little bit sad that Epiphany doesn't fall on a Sunday. And maybe Walter will preach on it. I don't know, but I didn't get to. So I'm glad that we are going to talk about Epiphany.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is awesome. Okay, well, tell me, which text do you want to start with?
I would love to start with Matthew 2, 1 through 12. And I'm using my phone, so let me just quickly pull it up. And if it's okay with you, mind if I read it?
That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. And I also just wanted to say hi to those who are here. Jenny and Mary Lou and Janet and Pam. Hi, Pam. Tammy, it's good to see you as well. And Janet. Oh, Janet, you talked twice, so I called you twice. Really good to see you. Really good to see you. In person. Pardon?
Well, I'm putting the scripture into the chat so folks can
Thank you. Matthew 2, 1 through 12. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born, the King of Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found him from the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route.
That is a classic Epiphany text.
Right.
So it occurs to me that two things are going on. I mean, one, that's like the Epiphany is the realization of Jesus, of light entering the world. But the other thing that's happening in the text that you just read, the historical event is the slaughter of the innocents.
Yes.
About to occur. So it's a setup
Yes.
for that.
Yes.
So what's stirring around in you with this?
Well, I was left with a question I wanted to ask you.
Oh, yikes. Okay.
What warns you to go in another direction?
Oh.
And who accompanies you?
Ooh. What great questions. What warns me or us to go in another direction? And who accompanies us?
Yes, and I was also thinking if you wish to type in the chat, it is public, so you may wish not to, and that's fine as well. But if you wish to write in the chat what warns you to go in another direction and or who accompanies you, I'd love to hear what you all are saying as well or thinking.
Yeah, it's a great way to have a communal discussion. I don't know if this is true for you, C, but I have this problem of often ignoring my gut instinct. And I think there are lots of reasons for that. I think some of it is that it gets taught out of us. And some of it, I think, is about, you know how, I don't know, it's maybe an old fashioned sort of the womanly intuition or women's. That doesn't seem to be a compliment in our society. Use your head, use your brains, so I have, I think, a lot of reasons that I don't. It's difficult for me to listen to my gut. But in the last several years, something that I have been practicing is noticing what my instinctive responses or thought or desire. And still, I often don't go with that. I often will make a decision that feels more rational or logical or studied.
Right.
But then reflecting back after I've made a decision to also be like, oh, you know what? There was a different way to go, and I should have gone that other direction. And I even wanted to go that other direction. So one thing I think that I am trying to teach myself to pay attention to is my gut. That's not the only way to talk about that, right? I'll actually think that that's my inner voice. That's my inner teacher. That's where God resides.
Yeah. Your inner wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing I think is really important for me is checking. So if I was thinking I need to go a different route, I need to go home a different way, checking with someone I really, really trust.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, that could be literal or metaphorical, right?
Yes. But not like, I'm going to put this question on Facebook and see what people say about it. Someone that you really believe is for you. And can hear you. Because I think sometimes we ask for advice from people that we have no business asking for advice from.
Oh, that's interesting. And then getting mad when we don't appreciate them not really hearing or understanding what the real issue is. Yeah.
So I have a real short list, like maybe 2 people literally, that I would check that with. Who are the people who accompany me? Is that the next question?
Yes, who accompanies you?
I love that question. It reminds me of something I heard that I think I shared on a Sunday recently about how birds migrate and how every bird pays attention to the 7 birds closest to them. They're not paying attention to
Oh,
everyone, but it's the 7 closest to them information that they're checking with and figuring out how to migrate with. So someone said to me, who are your 7 birds?
I heard you talking about that in one of the services recently, and it propelled this really great conversation in the car with Robin and me, actually.
That's how I think about who accompanies me. Like, who are the 7 people who
Yeah.
I would call to say, I need help, or I need you to go somewhere hard with me, or somewhere lovely with me. And again, I don't actually think there are 7.
I heard you say that before.
Or maybe more like 5. I don't know.
I love that.
I want to know what your answers to that question are.
Okay, let me go back to the questions. What warns you to go in another direction? This week, what warned me was a trusted colleague who's a minister friend of mine with whom I went through chaplain training. This woman, oh my gosh, she is just so wicked smart and insightful and intuitive, and she will slice and dice and get rid of the garbage right from the get-go. And so I was having some patriarchy problems, Jen. In fact, I'm realizing that patriarchy in spiritual spaces, I'm new to spiritual spaces just in terms of holding sacred space for others. It's only been a couple of years that I've been in this practice, and I'm realizing patriarchy runs amok. Whew. And so I'm really having a hard time navigating that because my bristles go up and I want to react. And I also want to take the time and express and explain why this is problematic. And I haven't been terribly successful. I've been somewhat successful. And so I went to my 2 chaplain friends of mine and I said, look, this is going on. What do I do? And Sarah is her friend, and Sarah, my friend, and Sarah said, see, they don't give a crap about your thoughts and feelings. You need to go back to the ethics. And it reminds me of relational ethics. I pride myself on being able to consult both my mind and my heart, but when I get fiery, like about subjects related to injustice, my heart just overrides my thinking and I get reactionary. And so then I went into a deep dive consulting many, many resources in chaplain land. And I got the gambit of responses, everything from what is this garbage coming out of your mouth to I experience this all the time and I'm with you. And oh my gosh, it's so hard. So that was who helped me go, chaplain friends helped me go this week from a more reactionary stance to a more, let's look at ethics here. And the whole process took me all of Sunday and it was painful. And I'm still exhausted thinking about it. In terms of accompanying, we talked about the 7 birds in the car last weekend, Robin and I. And so we each listed, a church person or 2, a friend, a family member. And then I said to her, and then Terry and Anna, who are 2 of my colleagues that I talk to every single day. And they're the ones that'll just bounce everything off from something that's inconsequential to really big and deep subjects. And it's been a heavy week at work. And so it's been deep subjects of late. And I've just felt so appreciative of their accompaniment.
Yeah. Can you imagine? I mean, I can imagine, and I do, going through life without having those companions.
No.
Yeah.
No. And I find myself in a similar situation to you, Jen, in that I find that I'm the companion for others more often than they are the companion for me. And I really have to watch myself and protect and guard my home life specifically so that I can be present with my spouse and my animals and my home and the beautiful things around me. or else I will just run myself into the ground. So I was appreciating that as well.
Yeah.
I need people too.
Yes. And you have a really something I admire is your ethic around self-care and that reminder to care for yourself, which started for me today in the poem you read, that
Mm.
grounding and noticing self and
Mhm.
caring well. Because if we don't care for ourselves, of course, it doesn't work out so well when we try to care.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
For me, one thing about this, or a couple things about this text from Matthew's gospel and this story that I really love, and I find so much connection to the events of specifically this day, where a tyrant, right, who just controls by this rule of absolute fear,
Here. Mhm.
violence,
Yes.
the erasure of anything other, and who has ruled for a really long time, longer than 4 years. But then when I think about, like, let's extrapolate that because Trump didn't create a problem, right?
No.
That's been a really long time that
Yeah.
maybe his presidency has just amplified or brought something to the surface for us. But he's behaving in this ridiculous way and trying to crush everything that might threaten him. And now it's a baby. It's a baby that threatens him so intensely that he sends, the wise people out on this hunt in order to kill the baby.
With a false narrative.
With a totally false narrative. Yeah, with this cover of here's what I want to do. I want to pay homage. I want to seek. So fascinating.
Feels so familiar.
It does feel really familiar. And also the subversion of the story feels familiar.
I want to hear more about that, but go ahead.
Well, the wise people, right? It's the dream that warns them, go home a different way. And so they do, they risk subverting the authority of Herod, which is risky. And they don't do what they've been instructed to do. And I don't know how that plays out for them. We're not told, but I imagine if Herod ever found them, it wouldn't be pretty ending. And then the midwives, they're midwives who subvert throughout this story, and that's a link to a Hebrew scripture. And this the subversion of empire and politics that this particular story draws our attention to, I think is so pertinent to where we're at. I think sometimes we feel like what's happening right now is outrageous and it has never happened before. How will we ever get through this? But it's a story that keeps repeating.
Cyclical, for sure.
Cycling, yeah. And there are always subverters. Right? There are always people who are willing to risk their own selves.
And Tammy said keeping power versus sharing power.
Yeah. There's a theologian whose name is escaping me, but they talk about the power of presence versus the presence of power. I think that's another way to think about how we use our presence and our bodies and our Yeah, in this story, the genocide's coming next, right? Herod is going to then he will kill all of the baby boys, which is a rearticulation of the Exodus.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and that's where the Hebrew midwives were the subverters in that story by refusing to kill the babies when they were born.
I'm really loving this framework of subversion. And when you said risk, tears just popped to my eyes. And spent moments just now trying to think about why I'm having an emotional response to this word risk. And I think it has to do with a theme that comes around again and again for me of noticing atrocities and risking talking about it, specifically professionally.
Mhm.
And when I say atrocities, I mean outright misogyny or homophobia. The list is long, and my life is so privileged, so my version of atrocity is probably pretty ridiculous compared to others. Nonetheless, I keep ending up in spaces where um, powerful white men, I encounter them in a way that I feel compelled to say this is not okay, and it has cost me greatly. Um, and your word reminded me that there's something holy about a risk as well. That it's not just about creating trouble, even good trouble, but that there's something very sacred about it because I suppose by me speaking, I'm putting wings over a lot of people that maybe can't speak, don't know to speak, maybe don't see there's a problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And it is risky and it comes at a personal price every
it does. It does. It does. Caroline is one of my colleagues, and she has just been a real gem in seeing, even if she may not know all the dynamics, and encouraging and saying, keep going, essentially. It's really nice to have those people in your court.
Yes, the birds that are flying
Yeah,
with you, and
yeah,
reminding you also that your work is not in vain, and the
right.
risk is a worthy and holy one because
Mm,
when you get beat up over and over again,
mhm.
you start to doubt yourself. I think,
Completely,
I think,
completely.
why am I doing this? And
Uh-huh, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
What's the word? Not brainwashing, there's another word.
gaslighting.
Gaslighting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oof.
Yes.
You just what did you say? Did you say something about you said something about Carolyn, she sees things, and for some reason, this reminds me of. I'm going to make a little bit of a jump to Mark, which I know you didn't read, and is the Sunday text. But there's something about the gospel story in Mark for Baptism of Christ Sunday, which is the baptism of Jesus, that has some real significance around truth, telling the truth, and the
Mm,
importance of telling the truth. And it's such a significant part of that story. And I'm reminded of it now talking with you because that is something that I have seen you risk time and time again. And you're telling the story of it now is telling the truth, risking the vulnerability around telling the truth, and knowing that it always comes with a price.
mm,
And that happens at the onset of the ministry of Jesus. As this baptism is occurring, part of what's happening is truth starts to be told. And in baptism, Jesus, it's this in the evangelical world, when you and I were baptized, well, this is my story of baptism. I always heard that it was a exterior act of an interior commitment. So it's a way of aligning yourself as saying, like, I'm a Christ follower. I've accepted Jesus into my heart. And I don't think that's entirely wrong or bogus, but I think it comes from this story, right? From Jesus being baptized. And actually what's happening in the baptism of Jesus, it's a highly symbolic gesture of Jesus disassociating himself from empire and aligning himself with John, who is a heretic and a traitor to the empire. And it's this moment of, I'm ready to tell the truth about who I am and what is happening in the world around me. And I think sometimes baptism for people like us, it's a fire baptism. Telling the truth and risking vulnerability happens in like this crash and burn.
What do you mean by from people like us?
Well, I think that I feel like people maybe who have grown up or spent a lot of time in the United Church of Christ, maybe they don't realize how misogynist and patriarchal the rest of the religious world is. And spirituality in places like hospitals and healthcare is still a very patriarchal system. And there's always, you and I are not on the inside of that. We're not men. And I have the privilege, I guess the way it plays out, right, in this world, I have the privilege of being a straight white woman. You're a queer white woman. And it doesn't play well for either of us. And we are risking just by being who we are in those spaces.
Matthew said something I want to read. He said, as a white privileged male, I recognize I risk less when I speak out. I rarely risk any of my basic needs when I speak out. Wow, Matthew, I rarely risk any of my basic needs when I speak out. Thank you for saying that. Somebody asked me online last night, how do you know if a person is being patriarchal or not? And my response was, you can tell usually within 2 sentences if somebody is seeing it as a real issue and aligning as an ally, if they're white and male identified, or if they're not. And Matthew, you just in 2 sentences said, I see, and I acknowledge. And that for me is hearing that creates a space in me that goes, oh, yeah, okay, there's somebody by my side that sees and believes and acknowledges, even if you never did another thing, Matthew, now I see you as an ally.
Yeah. It's so important to be the person who's willing to say, I believe you, your message. I just, and when certain people do that, maybe in the way that we're speaking right now, when men do that, it's really
excuse my computer. It was a meeting for Robin coming up. There's a cheese meeting.
A cheese meeting? I want to go to that meeting. Sounds like an amazing meeting.
She goes to lots of cheese meetings.
I'll bet she gets to eat cheese at her cheese meetings.
She does. It's a ridiculous amount of cheese in our home. I mean, people give her cheese on the streets. Oh, Robin, I have this great cheese. Why don't you try it? It is kind of a wonderful life.
Oh gosh, I love that.
I know, right?
Did you read the Isaiah text as well for Epiphany? Isaiah 60, 1 through 6.
I sure did.
Yeah, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Let me pull it up. Do you mind reading it?
I would love to. And I'm going to type it into the chat so folks know where we're headed. It's Isaiah 60 verses 1 through 6.
And yes, Tammy, people of color have live a life of risk.
I think yes. I think I also might have just typed 50. That's a lie. It's Isaiah
60.
Okay. Arise and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples. But the Lord will arise upon you, and his glory will appear over you. Nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. Lift up your eyes and look around. They all gather together. They come to you. Your sons shall come from far away, and your daughters shall be carried on their nurses' arms. Then you shall see and be radiant, and your heart shall thrill and rejoice, because the abundance of the sea shall be brought to you, the wealth of the nations shall come to you. A multitude of camels shall cover you, the young camels of Midian and Ephah, all those from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and frankincense and shall proclaim the praise of the Lord. So, what did that text? You said yes right away, like yes.
Yes, I did, because I was reading all the Epiphany texts as you mentioned, and the theme of light and the theme of justice were hand in hand in all of these texts for today. And something came alive in me reading this, and I haven't been able to articulate what that is. So maybe you would be willing to tell me what comes up for you when you read this text.
These texts are hard for me because I think that my first thought is always historical context.
Yeah, right.
So I'm always thinking about who this text was written to, and that is messy and complicated, right? Because it's written to a really oppressed community, like a truly oppressed community, who were completely without hope, and whose imaginations also stirred them around images of violence and like genocide and wealth, and those were the ways that the text kind of speaks about the light coming, and that's a really if you read it just as that, then I think where we get is stuff like American exceptionalism and the city on top of a hill and the light in the dark, right? And a lot of Christianity goes there. And so that's always my first response when I'm reading these texts. And then I remember that this is ancient literature. And ancient literature uses these imageries of rampalism and I don't know what it looks like to live in a world where entire people groups are regularly exterminated, except hello, now my white eyes are seeing some of how, yes, that has continued to play out forever and how I've been a part of white supremacy. But this text is a bridge to the Christmas story, right? It's like our bridge between Christmas and Epiphany is this imagery of light coming into the world and thinking about the light of Christ, because this is the prophecy that gets picked up in the Gospels around Jesus.
Right, yes.
So then I think about it in current context, and I think about how dark a day like today feels and how much worry I have I don't feel good about Biden's narrow victory. I don't feel good about the political rupture. I don't feel good about the division in our nation and how many people felt like it was perfectly acceptable to vote for a misogynist, white supremacist tyrant. And I just wonder, how will we heal the heart of democracy? How will we heal the fracture in this country? And it's a fracture that actually hits real home to me because it's my family. It's my relatives and the ones who are part of the population that voted for him.
Yes, and yes.
So that's where I go with this text. Like, it reminds me that it is actually my job to be the light. And yes, the light came into the world, and it has always been a part of the world. and we remember it in our very particular Christian way as the coming of Jesus into the human story. But also that you and I see are the incarnation of God. We are the light, and our task is to be the light bringers.
Be the light bringers.
I just think there's so much that's harder about that than we often talk about, because it's also about being the light bringers to everyone. The people who are arms standoff on the floor of the house, like, that seems impossible to me. But this text reminds me that it is part of our divine call, and that's a promise. I don't know if that brings
I love your answer, and I love the breadth of it. Thank you. I'm thinking about being a light bearer isn't always beautiful. It's not sunshine and rainbows and roses and puppies. And I'm always brought to a place of what would the word be? Being baffled, being humbled, being confused, daring to hope when it comes to people who subscribe to politics and ideologies that are, from my perspective, in direct contradiction with the teachings of Christ. And it's hard because, having spent 35 years there, I get it. Conceptually, I get it. And I also ache in my body. So, yes, this is a very unformulated response, but I deeply feel what you're saying. And I could see the metaphor of my family. It really is a symbol of what's happening in the nation, or that what's happening in the nation is really a symbol or metaphor for what my experience is in my family. I feel very similarly.
Yeah, it's complicated, and I think that you and I, we hold a unique kind of space in this political moment, because I wonder how many people are sort of straddling both worlds, who have roots in a particular demographic, and have branches like I do in this art, and who, it's not so far, it's so close to me, right? It is people I love, and I'm not going to give up a relationship with.
Right. Which is an easy go-to for people. Why do you even hang out with them? Why do you even give them the time of day? That's a really tough one, because if we are all about connection, one human to another, and then we're willing to throw it away, that's on one side. And then on the other side is where do I hold the line that says, you treat all of humanity well, or I can't share space with you. And I'm always trying to find that middle ground.
Yeah.
Leslie said about light, which means being able to see the other in myself in order to be the light bearer. Yes, yes, and yes.
That is such a rough one, too.
Right.
We see the other in ourselves, and we're like, oh, yikes.
Ooh. And Connie said, a light bearer must first see the light within. Ooh, Connie, thank you.
That's some wisdom.
It is wisdom.
I want Matthew to say more about this song of Jonah.
Me too. Talk more, Matthew. Ginny says, I find it hard figuring out how to be a light bearer when family members are supporting what happened at the Capitol today. Ginny, I, as the young people say, feel you so hard on this.
Is that what they say? Feel you so hard?
Yes. Yeah. I think about President Clinton. I was in the height of my evangelicalism when Clinton had his illicit affair with Monica Lewinsky, whom I see as a victim. Let me just state that straight out in this. And I recall victim blaming within me and my church circles, friends. And I recall saying the words over and over to people, how can a person run a country if they can't even keep their marriage in order? There are so many really effective business owners and CEOs and teachers and scholars and ministers who have really effed up lives or marriages or are human, if you want to put it in that perspective. And it's really hard because that religiosity gets into this black and white thinking that says if they can't do this, then they can't do this. Maybe it comes from kind of the same people always talk about the scriptures, a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. I think it's a very similar thing, and it doesn't allow for the complexities and the darkness and the light and the breadth and the sin and the hope of humanity. All of it.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah.
Now I look at somebody like President Trump, and I ask my Christian siblings, evangelical siblings, where do you stand with personal failure, so to speak, using that language, their language? Well, I'm praying for him. Nobody's perfect. The narrative has changed. There was not photos of President Clinton on evangelicals' refrigerators so they could pray for them.
Yeah.
It's changed in the last 20 years. So I don't know how to reconcile that within myself.
I mean, I think, it's such a big conversation, and there are so many stories or thoughts or possibilities. We don't have time to see the whole, but that's an interesting conversation. I find a lot of people are really curious about explain evangelicals to us. And
I want somebody to explain what do you say, kind of a progressive Christian to me. That's the foreign part for me. Shall we read Matthew's comments?
I think it's a poem. It's a poem.
Oh.
And it's lovely. I'm wondering if Matthew is the author.
Oh. Do you want to read it or do you want me to?
I almost feel like it cannot be read because we can't. I'm afraid I would do a disservice because when you have to copy it like this, you can't see where the breaks are. And he did write it.
Yeah, he must have written it because he said, yep.
Yeah, I know you can't look at it.
Yeah.
It's stunning. Well, see, it's 4:00. Is this about what we thought, that we would chat for about an hour?
I was thinking 45 minutes or an hour, and I cannot believe it's been an hour that we've been yammering on.
We can do it easily. We can fill up the time.
Pontificating.
So next week, when we get to next Wednesday, is this day Wednesday?
Yes, indeed.
We are going to be, theoretically, unless something really wild happens, rooting ourselves in the lectionary text for January 17th, which is the second Sunday of Epiphany. And probably spinning a little bit toward the world and current events as we do that, because I think that's how the scripture is best interacted with.
Especially with this theme that I recall Walter bringing up, and you mentioned several times, of addressing and bringing down empire. And I just wanted to say that I was thinking about how does it feel when a person who is oppressed or who has been oppressed holds a light versus somebody that perhaps has really walked in a space of privilege for lots and lots of, or big portions of their lives. The experience of being around one versus the other.
That's a really interesting question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We don't have to discuss, but it's something worth sitting with. I'd like to sit with it within myself.
For sure.
Yeah.
What would you leave folks with today any words of like wisdom or blessing?
Oh, well, can I give a blessing that I do? I'm going to move this computer because it's over here. A Buddhist blessing that I often give people. Very, very short, very brief. Thank you also, all of you who have commented and who have sat with us and not commented, for sharing space with us and hearing us. I hope that you have felt some anchoring in our time together, as I know I have. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you feel peace.
Blessings.
Blessings to you, Jen. Blessings to all who have joined us and will join us.
Thank you, C.
Yes.
I look forward to next week.
Me too.